Hi, this is Jeremy Williams, and thank you so much for participating in our pedagogy conversation, evaluating the creative process, which we had last Tuesday at Adelphi University's Performing Arts Center as part of their Arts Day 2012. This is a really big topic, and we covered a lot of ground, so I wanted to pull together 5 quick takeaways to recap our time together. First, what is the importance of the creative process in the performing arts classroom? We agreed that artists must have both technical mastery of their performance skills as well as know how to navigate the creative process to be able to have sustained success within their field and their career. We also agreed that the creative process empowers students to make bold and creative choices that they otherwise wouldn't necessarily know how or give themselves permission to make, that the process itself allows for greater creativity. And we also agreed that the creative process is a tool for problem solving both in and out of the classroom. And this is a really valuable tool for our students, no matter if they go on to be professional artists or not, that working with the clear creative process is a really empowering and useful problem solving skill set just in general in life. We need to start with defining what we mean by creative process. And when I asked this question in the room, there wasn't a really clear answer, and we didn't come to an agreement upon what the creative process is, like what a working definition is of that phrase. And we need to look at the phrase itself. There's an inherent contradiction between the words creative and process. When we think about the word creative, we think about being free and messy and improvisational, and anything can happen. And when we think about process, it's more of like a very rigid, structured, you do this, you do this, you do this. And that's the beautiful thing about the creative process itself. And this is the definition we arrived at together, which is, for the performing arts, the creative process is merely a system of creating performance that includes exploration, discovery, learning, collaboration, and repetition. It's really within this contradiction between what we perceive as creative and what we perceive as process that creation actually happens. Having a structured way to navigate our creative impulses and be able to explore, discover, and repeat them again and again. After we defined what we meant by the creative process, we went on to talk about the 8 steps within the creative process for the performing artist. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in this takeaway. And so then we moved from talking about the need to define and share that definition with our students to then how we incorporate teaching the creative process into our classroom. And we really decided that there were 4 main areas for this that we needed. We need forms in which we can isolate the steps of the creative process. How are we looking at students analyzing material and giving them tools to identify these technical needs and demands and questions? Is this happening through exploring choreography, scene work, exploring a new piece of music? What is the form to isolate the step of the creative process that we're focusing on? And then we also need language to describe and define what we mean and describe a clear pathway for students to repeat it. So these 8 steps provide not only a logical sequence to end up with a wonderful piece of performance, or the potential for a wonderful piece of performance, but we're really looking at it being a clear tool for students to talk about their experience from within. And of course, we have to create safe space for our students to learn and explore in new ways. That without that safety, that risk and experimentation can't really take place fully. And finally, we need documentation to support our students, both in terms of giving them definitions and different ways, conceptual ways of understanding the creative process. And we also need to reinforce it within our classroom and our teaching. So this documentation can help us in a wide variety of ways. And of course, now we move to what are we actually evaluating when we are teaching the creative process in our room and in our classrooms and rehearsals. And when we're looking at evaluation and assessment, there's a wide variety of things that we can look at, but essentially we're really looking at 3 major areas. One, what is our students' understanding of the creative process? Do they know what we mean? Do they have a logical order that they can follow? And then looking to how are they using that? So step one is understanding, and step two is using that process. And then we can really look at this third segment, which is how are they developing as artists over time. There's a lot of different ideas about what kind of metrics we should use to assess, and we all in the end agreed that metrics for evaluating the creative process and how our students are developing is really individual to our own classrooms and our own teaching styles, and we really need to figure out what we value and what our values are so we can really teach to those values. I really enjoyed our conversation around our current evaluation practices and how we give feedback. It was a really fun moment when we looked at what we'd written on the board about specifically how we were giving encouragement, and we realized that while the words that we were saying were intended to be encouraging, they were actually opinions and not feedback, and that opinions aren't really all that helpful, but direct observation and critical response is, and that we're really confusing opinion with feedback at times. So we had a really fun brainstorm session around these three different categories of encouragement, criticism, and questions. And let's look at each of those real quickly. So encouragement, we had our phrase was, "Yes, you finally got it," which it sounds really great, but there's definitely some judgment in there, and that really should become or could become, "I really like it when you chose to," and fill in that blank, and related it to a very specific moment. And very similar for criticism. A fun one that we all got a good laugh at was, "Let's not do that again." And we can look at that becoming something much more clear and direct. "You just did X. Next time, can you try Y instead? And also, let me know how that goes for you." That simple shifting of language from opinion to statement gives the student something really directly to work with in a way to evolve their work. And finally, we talked about what kind of questions are we asking. And another funny one was, "What was that?" And how can we translate that and make it really be about their own experience of asking them, "Well, how did that go for you?" Or, "What would you like the audience to experience in that moment?" And really looking at questions being a way that students can self-evaluate and that they can start taking on ownership of their own experience. And that really gets us to a really wonderful thing around evaluation, and that we all agreed that we really want to find ways that we are effectively giving feedback and evaluating our students, but also providing them with tools to evaluate themselves. And that's really one of the great things that performing arts training does across the board, is really give our artists and our students ways and tools to look at what they're doing and what they're putting into the world and evaluate it in a really non-judgmental, very clear and direct way. And that's really a great thing. So coming back to these steps in the creative process for the performing artists, you guys really inspired me, and I'm going to be working on unpacking this a little bit more, so stay tuned, and I'll be releasing a little bit of writing on that in the next few weeks. And so feel free to sign up to get that emailed to you when it comes out. And thank you again for participating in this really wonderful conversation around pedagogy and how we evaluate the creative process. Thanks again to Adelphi University and the Performing Arts Center for hosting Arts Day 2012.